So this is a follow-up to some previous videos I've done before on multi-tiled streaming terrains using Vegetation Studio. And I'm in 2018 this time, so I'm using Vegetation Studio Pro. I've got as a starting point a large 4K terrain that I created with Gaia, and I've added Vegetation Studio Pro to the scene. Just go to Windows, Awesome Technologies, add Vegetation Studio Pro to scene, and then I created a vegetation package. So I just have one biome, just a default biome. I just went into config, then right click create, but I better do it up here, otherwise you're not going to see what I'm doing. So at the bottom, Vegetation Studio package, and the package I did was a 4 texture one, simply because that's what my terrain is using. It's just really, bog standard 4. I clicked on read textures from terrain, and that loaded these in. Then I went into edit biomes and just started dropping and dragging some grass, some plants, and a few trees and rocks. If I quickly show you what I've got in terms, it's really nothing fancy, but it'll give you an idea of, so rocks, a couple of types of grass, some flowers, and a couple of types of trees. Okay, nothing too complicated there, and you can see what's going on down here. So whether you'd need to bake or not is debatable. I'm tending to prefer baking, simply because my thinking is, as you're loading each tile, you're introducing an overhead of the Vegetation Studio having to kind of think about what to load next. I'm assuming, it's hard to tell. It certainly was the case in 2017. And I think Leonard will be able to give you more advice on his Discord as to the pros and cons of baking or not. But I'm kind of following up on a specific question from the Discord about how do you get a baked Vegetation Studio Pro setup to work with streaming. So I shall be using persistent storage. So again, you go down here to Awesome Technologies, but if I do it here, you'll be able to see it. So Awesome Technologies, persistent storage, create a persistent storage package, call this test 3, select that and scroll down to the bottom till you get to the persistent storage component, and drag it in. Let go. So it's asking you, do you want to initialize that for the current vegetation system? Well, it's a brand new one, so yes, and the answer would be yes anyway. If you want it to work with this package, vegetation package, then you need to initialize it. Now currently there's nothing stored, but I'm going to the bake vegetation tab. I'm not quite sure what's going on with these thumbnails. For me, they don't always appear, especially it seems to be the grass and the flowers don't appear. And if you've got more than one biome, they'll appear here, and you can select which one you want to bake. So bake vegetation item from rule set would be the one that's selected. Bake all vegetation items from rule set would be all in this biome, and then bake all vegetation from all vegetation packages biomes would be every single package, every single biome. And for me, since I've only got one biome, it doesn't actually make any difference which of those two I press. I'll just, for the sake of it, I'll go with the bottom one. And if you've got something baked already in the package, you're probably a good idea to clear and bake. For me, it makes no difference, clear and bake or bake, it's all empty. And one of the things I've found, which I'm starting to, for all its problems, and I'm thinking just minor bugs and niggles, and it's not that stable, I would say, the 2018 branch yet. It feels a little bit like an open beta to me on Unity's part, but for all that, it's actually pretty incredible and pretty fast because of the burst system and the entity component system, burst compiler, and that's what Vegetation Studio Pro is leveraging, and it's so much faster in terms of baking. I was able just to talk through the process, whereas in previous videos I had to kind of fast forward the video because it took anything from 20 minutes to an hour, and there it is, it's done. Now, little gotcha, if you now move to your stored vegetation, now I can see all the items that have been stored, and it's telling me the item count, but the storage size is 0, and that kind of can be a bit freaky. Now that doesn't change until, and even if you look at the persistent storage asset, it's still kind of 5 kilobytes. There's nothing in there yet, and then what you need to do to kind of get it all coming on is you need to save the scene. Unfortunately, the scene is not dirty, so there isn't a little star. So you just pick an item, any item, and just change it, and then go back, and that dirties the scene. See that star, and then I can just, you know, Control S or save scene, and just the act of doing that just gets everything loaded up again. Now if you go back to where we were, down to the stored vegetation, now you can see storage size 804. Brilliant. So we've got baked vegetation. Let's just play just to make sure that it's working okay. Taking a little while just to load up. Let me drag this across, and yes, we've got our vegetation still loading fine. So stop that. Now you might wonder, oh, well, is it definitely the baked vegetation that's actually playing? If you look on each of the items and select one of them, you'll see enable runtime spawn is now deselected, and I can do it on all of those, whereas previously it was ticked. So we are loading in the baked vegetation. I do miss there used to be a kind of a bigger, more obvious button in Vegetation Studio that just said re-enable all vegetation items, I think it said, and I might make a request so that gets put back in, because if you want to revert things, it's a bit of a pain having to go click through each one and tick that checkbox. But okay, so we've got a baked package. Now we're ready to start chunking so that we can stream our terrain. So I'm using Sectr for this. If you were doing World Streamer, the process would be exactly the same. First thing, one of the reasons I'm enjoying using Sectr is it does the tiling, splitting of the terrain in one go. You know, it gets it all ready in one fell swoop, which is just makes things a lot easier. So it's a 4K terrain. I tend to like to split those into 16, so you end up with a 256 by 256 tile. I only want one sector height, so one. It's not a multi-level map, so I just need it to be one single unit high, and I definitely want to split the terrain. That's the reason I'm using Sectr, and can leave all of that as it is because I'm just doing basic terrain streaming. So Sectr does take a little bit of time, and I let it do its stuff. Okay, so we're done. Took about 5 minutes or so. So we don't need this Sectr terrain tool anymore. It's done its job. We've got, you can actually see the tiles or the sectors that it's created. Perfect. And if I open that up, they're the different sectors and inside terrains. So So a couple of things that we need to do. We need to go into the Terrains tab of Vegetation Studio, and we need to turn off automatic calculation, so that essentially it will just take the whole of the area that we want, and when you deselect it, it thankfully seems to work out exactly what the extent is. So it's, if you look at the documentation, it's telling you that it's looking for the center point. So 0, 0 is the center of our terrain, or the original terrain, though the pre-cut one. So 0, 0 was the center of it, and then it extends to 2048 in each direction. It was a 4K terrain. So the height, I'm slightly less bothered about. I'll take it that it's guessed correctly, so I just find that I can just untick that and it automatically knows what the right dimensions are. But if it looks wrong, you know, obviously you might have to turn to your own. Now if you weren't doing streaming, the next bit you need to do is just add all Unity terrains. You just kind of go, that's it, and it just picks up all of those, and then you're good to go. So if I press play now, let me drag in the scene window. You'll see now the vegetation is coming through as you would expect. You just come down here so you can see a little bit of what's going on. So yeah, it's kind of what you would expect. I can just see the billboards in the distance. So if you just had a multi-terrain setup, no streaming, just, you probably wouldn't do it this way, but hey, who knows. That's all you do and you're good to go. Let me get down to, I've got I think 256 terrains. You just untick an area, automatic calculation. This is on the Terrains tab. Now the problem you have is that when you open Sectr stream, so that's now picked up all our sectors in the scene and export them to essentially their own individual scenes, it loses all those references, all those things just disappear. So it's kind of that reference to each terrain tile is useless to you. What you need to do, move that out of the way, is you need to select each terrain, look for the Awesome Technologies Unity terrain component, and you want to click on add, remove, at enable, disable. Just tick that. Now I don't really want to have to do it for each, and select and tick, so I'm just going to select all my terrains in the scene by searching for terrain type, just to make sure I've got everything I need. So that's all of them selected. You can see all the tiles in the scene view. Tick that and you're done. I'm now going to, might as well save I'll save scene. I'll remove the filter and export all sectors. So it's going to modify my scene. Yeah, I know that. Do I want to make a backup? Hey, why not? And then off it goes. This is going to take a while. I'll keep an eye on the time and I'll let you know how long it's taken. This is the longest part of the process. Okay, it's been about 25 minutes. It's done all of the sectors, so they're all now exported. So you can just see the sector component now, and no terrain. I've been getting some weird errors after doing that. I think it's the editor trying to keep up. Let me move back so we can see what we're doing. Sectr's got this slightly annoying habit of just recentering things for you. Now you can see Vegetation Studio still showing the billboards for the trees, but everything else is gone. Now what else do we need to do? Save the scene just in case. I've got my player. I need to add a region loader. Actually I've got one already in place, but if you don't, just go add component, look for Sectr region loader. The load size you'll want for R256 terrain tiles, I'm going for 512, so it's going to essentially hit a square of about 9 tiles around the player at any one time. You could follow the same process I've done in other videos, and then in the distance load mesh versions, low poly mesh versions of the terrain. But this is just about streaming with Vegetation Studio Pro. So I've got my Sectr in place. I'm just going to add, I've got an FPS counter so we can just keep an eye on things. What do I want? Oh, actually keep those on. I want to disable those. And no, that's not what I want to show. Lower center. Okay, that's all good. Right. Save that, and just so that you know, build settings here were empty before. Now it's all kind of as part of the export process in Sectr. It's added all those scenes, including the work scene that we're in, into the build settings. And that's important because these need to be in build settings for each one to load. Now you make this a little bit smaller, you can see both. Moment of truth. And here we have streaming terrain, and you can see how, okay, so we've got billboards across everywhere, but it's using essentially it's frustum culling, the Vegetation Studio frustum culling, to just load as much. Zoom in a little bit more. You can just about see it. If I zoom in a little bit more, you'll see what I mean. So it's only loading the vegetation that it needs to, and it's happening across tiles. So we're getting what, an FPS of about 50 or up to 100 if I stand still in the editor. But let's do a build. And I guess it's the moment of truth. Once you actually, you're not going to get true streaming. This the way that Sectr and WorldStreamer work is through additive asynchronous scene loading, and that just doesn't happen in the editor. You're always going to get these lags as each scene gets loaded. But let's find out what it does as a proper build. Okay, that's it. Now if you followed the other videos, I think we were hitting 130 FPS. Let's find out what this has got to give us, and I'm going to keep on the same settings. A bit smaller than I would usually use, but because of the video capture. Let's find out what we've got. 700 plus. And as before, as this next tiles are loading, this FPS counter is showing a -1. It's slightly useful as it tells you when it's happening, because actually in the scene there's zero lag. absolutely no lagging whatsoever. It's just amazing frame rate, and I have to say, just for that, I'm sold on 2018. I've been kind of dragging my feet. I mean, okay, I haven't got huge amounts of vegetation in the scene, but I'm really impressed. And obviously I haven't got any post-processing effects or anything like that, but it's doing a great job. So there you are, that's Vegetation Studio Pro, and persistent package and a persistent storage bake of our vegetation on a multi-tiled terrain. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next one.